And I would argue that as we try to guide this awakening consciousness in the United States, that we have roughly two key ideological competitors. There are two schools of thought that we should try to counter and refute and win young people away from. The first school that we need to combat is called libertarianism. Libertarianism is a philosophy, it's a viewpoint, it's widely believed here in the United States that there's nothing wrong with capitalism. That here in the United States, the problem isn't capitalism, the problem is that we have not real capitalism. I'm sure you've encountered this, right? Now, libertarianism isn't just wrong, okay? It's not simply incorrect, because this is real capitalism if we've ever seen it. Profits are definitely in command of the US economy. Production for profit, an economy organized to make profits for private owners, that's capitalism. The United States is capitalism. But libertarianism is far, far more dangerous than simply being wrong, right? People can be wrong. The reason that libertarianism is so dangerous is because libertarianism brings with it a very poisonous philosophy, right? If you look at not simply the economic policies advocated by libertarians, right? Libertarians want to privatize the school system and break the teachers' union. So teachers get lower wages and lower benefits. Public schools are charter schools for profit. Libertarians want prisons for profit, right? Anything is better if the government doesn't do it, right? They want prisons to be privatized. They want more profits for the prison corporations. Libertarians are excited about private military contractors. Libertarians are excited about the governments locally not having enough money for paved roads. And they're excited about cutting the taxes on the rich. They're excited about cutting back public services like food stamps. But if you look past simply the policies that they advocate, it's the philosophy libertarians advocate that is the most deadly. You look into Ayn Rand, right? The philosopher, the woman who invented the philosophy of objectivism. Ayn Rand pushes the notion that kindness and compassion and all kinds of human solidarity is a weakness, right? That she argues that one should simply be self-interested. She actually has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, right? Ayn Rand pushes a very, very sinister worldview. There's a book called The Fountainhead. It was a novel she published. And in the novel, The Fountainhead, the hero, Howard Rourke, he's this architect and he's non-conforming. No one, he builds buildings and designs them in like unconforming ways or whatnot. And he's a hero because the rest of the world doesn't understand him. He's this great individual. But there's a particularly ugly scene in The Fountainhead where Howard Rourke, the hero, breaks into the apartment of a woman and violently rapes her. And Ayn Rand's narration portrays it as somehow being a good thing, because this powerful man is asserting his will. This is the kind of morality that is being pushed by libertarianism. It leads to a philosophy that says might is right, that it is okay to harm other people, that it is okay to prey on other people. If other people are suffering, they deserve to be suffering. The strength goes to the strong. And as much as libertarian economic policies are different than fascism, the mindset that you find in the writings of Ayn Rand or in the teachings of the internet guru Stefan Molyneux, this is a fascist philosophy. This is a philosophy that argues that human solidarity, kindness, and compassion are a weakness, and that certain people need to be put down. Certain people need to be suppressed and deprived, and that in order for society to flourish, you need to overall see the suppression of some people. Libertarianism is very, very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous, but it feeds into the isolation that many young people in our country feel right now, right? This is a hard time. The holidays are a hard time. Why did they invent, Christmas? Why did they invent Yuletide? Why did they invent New Year's celebrations? All of these things came into existence because the winter is a hard time. It's cold outside. It's dark, right? People generally kind of feel lonely. They feel sad, right? And the reason we have winter holidays is so that we can be connected with each other and we can have celebrations to try and deal with that. This is humanity dealing with the natural, seasonal change and how it affects us. So to have a situation where, during the winter season, people have to socially isolate or socially distance, right? It is compounding these problems. And there are so many young people out there that are interested in socialism or interested in opposing the government, opposing the status quo, but they do it in isolation. They do it on the internet. And this particularly vile philosophy of libertarianism feeds into their isolation. It tells them that they're isolated because the world just doesn't understand them. They're a great man. They're the motor of the world. They're a Howard Rourke. And if they can just learn to be more selfish and more cruel, if they can learn to reject solidarity, to reject kindness and compassion, they can somehow be more powerful. When you look at the evils of Ayn Rand or libertarianism, you're really forced to think of a line from the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx, he wrote about the bourgeoisie, it compels nations on pain of extinction to adopt its mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst. It compels them to become bourgeois themselves. In one word, it creates the world after its own image. And really, libertarianism is an effort on the part of the ruthless, self-interested, antisocial capitalist bosses to teach the youth of America, the working people of America, to think like them, to be ruthless like them, to lack solidarity like them, to reject human brotherhood and collectivism like them. But I am convinced that there are many young people who have been wrapped up in this demonic lie called libertarianism, who could become socialists, who could become Marxists, who could become revolutionaries. And that leads me to what I think is our second primary ideological opponent in this time, which is synthetic leftism, right? What we preach on here, what we talk about, what we study, Marxism, Leninism, the tradition of socialism, whether it come from, Bolivarian traditions, Ba'athist Arab socialism, socialism with Chinese characteristics, what we push, the leftist philosophy, is totally contrary to a school of thought that has sprung up on the internet and elsewhere that is very popular these days. There's a school of thought that I would basically call synthetic leftism. And while what we preach here is very, very optimistic and excited about the future, while what we preach here is about bringing people together, this is a philosophy and a viewpoint that is very pessimistic. It says the world is falling apart. There are too many people in the world. We're all using up too many resources. The environment is being polluted. We have to reduce the human population. We're headed for some big ecological disaster, number one. And it says that the way to build a better world is by tearing people down, right? We need people to reduce their consumption and have less. We need people who have a little bit of privilege in life to be shamed and beaten down and made to feel guilty. And that the way to improve the world is through destruction and reduction, and they have a dark view of the world. Now, this is not Marxism. This is a very dark, pessimistic school of thought. It is about destruction. But many people see it and they think that it's Marxism. It calls itself socialism. It calls itself Marxism. But what they believe is fundamentally in opposition to what we believe. Look, we know climate change is a reality. Climate change is not a hoax. It is a fact. However, the solution to climate change is human progress, invention, getting beyond fossil fuels. If someone is wanting to stop global warming, they should be very, very, very excited about what China is doing right now with fusion energy research. China is making great strides toward getting us off of carbon emissions and greenhouse gases, right? And the answer to climate change is human progress. It's new inventions. It's new discoveries. It's new modes of production. It's organizing the economy in a rational way so that we use resources strategically, thinking about the long term rather than just what's in the short interests of profits. The answer to the ecological problems is historical progress. It's moving forward. But that is not the view that you get from the prevailing voices in the environmental movement. The view you get from them is that human beings are a cancer on Mother Earth. Nature is out of balance. We need some mass act of destruction to restore the order to the planet. And on top of that, you get a message that there are some people that just have it too good, right? And that there are people that have it too good because of where they live, or what their ancestry is, or their gender, or whatnot. And rather than understanding that the answer is to bring everyone up by giving special attention to those who have suffered the most, giving special attention to people who suffer on the part of their race, or part of their gender identity, or their sexual orientation, or whatnot, or their national origin, or whatnot. Instead of arguing that the answer is to bring everyone up and give special attention to those who have suffered the most, their emphasis is on rather that we need to tear people down, and that is the way to correct things. And it is a pessimistic school of thought. And many of the young people, I'm convinced, who get caught up in libertarianism have looked at Marxism and socialism, and they've not heard the kind of things that we're talking about here. Instead, what they've heard is the message of the synthetic left. They've heard this destructive message, this message that says people have it too good, we need to tear things down, there is no hope, we need to shame people. They see that, and they think Marxism is unattractive. They think Marxism is a hateful, destructive, pessimistic identity politics movement. And so because of that, they turn to this very, very sinister school of thought called libertarianism. But what does libertarianism offer? Why would someone become a libertarian? Well, libertarianism has within it, despite all of its flaws and evil, it does emphasize the aspirations of the small business owner. Libertarianism emphasizes working hard and getting ahead. It emphasizes the American dream. It says that you can start a small business and you can make millions of dollars and you don't want the government to get in your way. It appeals to optimism. And that is what makes it deadly. It appeals to the optimism that people have, because leftism has become a movement dominated by pessimism. It is libertarianism and the right wing that has co-opted optimism. And essentially, what is needed in our time, if we're going to get out of the mess that we're in, what is needed in our time is we need a socialism that destroys the pessimism and the darkness of the synthetic left, but also destroys the sociopathy and the individualism and the demonic, greedy nature of the libertarian movement, and instead creates an optimistic, constructive, hopeful socialism. That is what is needed in our time. And that is what only the Center for Political Innovation can offer. Only we can offer this, right? The synthetic left has it wrong. The libertarians have it wrong. Only we can offer this. We have a special project that we are carrying out. And it's not an activist project. I'm not organizing demonstrations. It's not an electoral project. People want to vote and run for office and campaign. That's their business, but I'm not involved in that, and neither is the Center for Political Innovation. This is an ideological project. This is about pushing the socialist movement into a new direction and getting the socialist movement to change course so that it could actually capture the imagination of the American people. Folks, I want to just end by highlighting or re-highlighting one of the points that I made on a recent live, which is about ideology. Why is ideology important? A lot of people will tell you that ideology is not important. All that matters is whether we're in the streets, we're protesting, we just got to build the movement, right? Ideology is unimportant. Well, I'm going to tell you why ideology is important. Ideology is important for this simple reason. Imagine that you're driving down the road. Imagine that you're in your car and you're driving down the road. When you're driving down the road, you know where you came from, you know where you're going, and you know how you're getting there. That's ideology. But now I want you to imagine that you're driving down the road and suddenly you get struck with amnesia or something, and you don't know where you're going, and you don't know where you came from. In fact, you don't even know how you're getting there. What would you do in that moment? You would panic, right? You would stop the car. You couldn't keep going someplace if you didn't know where you were going or how you were getting there, didn't know where you were coming from. Ideology is what tells us where we came from, tells us where we're going, and it tells us how we're getting there. And for many years, for the majority of US history, people were given a, forgive me for swearing, a bullshit ideology, right? We were told that this is the greatest country in the world. And if anyone doesn't agree with that, they must be brainwashed. It's the greatest country in the world, the freest country in the world. All other countries want to be just like the United States. We have the best system that anyone's ever had. We're the most free anyone's ever had. If you don't like it here, you should move to another country. This is a bullshit ideology. Well, now millions of Americans are waking up to realize this is a bullshit ideology. It is, right? It's not true. The United States was founded on slavery and the genocide of Native Americans. The United States has waged ugly wars that have murdered people. 1950s and 60s, we had the highest standard of living in the world, but all those houses and cars and TV sets and hula hoops were dripping in blood. The blood of the Vietnamese people, the blood of the Korean people, the blood of the African Americans who were living under Jim Crow, the blood of the Chicano people who were made to basically feel as second-class citizens and function as second-class citizens in their own land. I mean, the blood of the indigenous people who were slaughtered in mass, that the United States, in the mythology of the United States that, was discovered by Christopher Columbus, who in 1492 sailed the ocean blue, and the Pilgrims, had a lovely dance party and just loved the Native Americans, and we all got along. This is all a mythology. It's a lie, and it's being refuted, and Americans know it's false. But instead of realizing that the ideology that they have is wrong and adopting a new socialist and anti-imperialist ideology, what has happened is millions of Americans have seen that the ideology that built this country is a lie. And instead of adopting a new ideology, they are simply told that there is no truth, that there is nothing to believe in, there is no hope for the future, that every cause is a lie, that every movement is a deception, that there is nothing you can really believe in. Everything is a con, everything is a hustle. And I believe it is that lack of ideology, the replacement of the American imperialist ideology with no ideology, with postmodernism. It's that is leading to the great crisis of mental health in the United States, right? Many young people in the United States, who perhaps their parents were raised to believe they were Americans and the descendants of pioneers who were, the most free in the world. Well, now many young people in the United States are growing up and saying, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I came from. I don't know where I'm going. And I don't really know what the point of life is. And that is the crisis facing the United States. And what we're here to say is you do have an identity. We can tell you who you are. You are carrying with you the heritage of John Brown and Harriet Tubman and Gus Hall and William Z. Foster and Huey Newton. You are carrying with you the legacy of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. You are carrying with you the heritage of the abolitionist movement and the suffragist movement and the labor movement. You have an identity. You have an identity as a working class person. You have an identity as a progressive, as a person who has stood against these ugly wars, stood against discrimination, stood against the horrors of the capitalist system. You have an identity as a revolutionary, and you have a future. And that future is overturning the capitalist system and establishing a new society in the United States, building an entirely new America, a government of action that fights for working families. You have an identity. You have a road to go on. You know where you came from. You know where you're going, and you know how we're going to get there. That is the message of the Center for Political Innovation. And I think this country in 2021 is going to be more ripe than ever to hear this message of hope, optimism, and constructive socialism. So I thank you. That concludes my remarks.